Give everybody a couple of seconds to sort of tune in, everything to kick off. And rightio, ladies and gentlemen, Dean McCrae here, your Riverina Liberal Democrats, and this is the Riverina Rebellion. Obviously, as a candidate for the Riverina, I've called my campaign the Riverina Rebellion as we challenge Michael McCormack, who is the incumbent of the Nationals, for his dominance over the region. He's obviously achieved very little outside of, well, within the promise grasp of what he's made. And as such, I've actually teamed up with all the other lower house candidates that are currently announced, the independents and small parties, and we're working together to certainly challenge the Nationals' dominance out here in the bush. And as such, I've been doing a little program every Monday night for about 20 minutes where we discuss this magnificent document, the Freedom Manifesto, which is the Liberal Democrats' core principles, particularly for this election. We've been a party for 20 years. We've had some great policies, but now we've channeled those policies into this amazing document, the Freedom Manifesto. This week, I have former Queensland Premier and current Liberal Democrat candidate, or Senate candidate, for Queensland, Campbell Newman. Thank you so much for your time, Campbell.
Great to be with you, Dean, and great to be with you all viewers, yeah.
Mate, it was a big jump to have a man of your standing join us over here in our little libertarian party here when you did. I'll just touch on quickly, what made you think that the Liberal Democrats was a better option than the Liberal Party?
Well, I suppose very quickly, mate, it's like this, that I never wanted to be in politics again, Dean. I've got a great business that I run with some terrific business partners, and I've enjoyed that. And I tell you what, life's a lot easier doing your own thing and being your own boss. But after the last 2 years of what we've seen with the restrictions on our freedom in this country and the way that supposed Liberal Party governments, not just the federal government, but some of the state governments as well, have just completely trashed our freedoms, and then state oppositions of the so-called Liberal Party who've been as weak as water, I just couldn't stand by any longer, mate. I couldn't sit on the sidelines and watch this garbage going down. And, I firstly left the Liberal National Party in disgust in July last year. And I had a look around. I thought, well, I could have stood as an independent. I had some overtures from some other parties, but the Liberal Democrats came to me and sort of pitched that I should join, and I'm here. And I guess the thing I really like is the philosophy. So probably, your regular viewers would know all about that. But I think it's worth reflecting on, what the libertarian values really are. And they're the real values of the real Liberal Party values, if I can put it that way. So we're into less government, more freedom, people being responsible for their own lives, taking that responsibility, letting people take as much of their own money home rather than the taxman taking it, getting government out of our lives, letting us take responsibility for for our own path in life and our children's education. That's what libertarians are all about. Low tax, low debt, balanced budgets, again, minimal government interference. But the thing I also like was that on the social side of it, we're progressive. And it's, Dean, the way I always tell it, it's like, I'm not there to tell you how to live your life. So I don't care about your sexuality or, who you associate with. And similarly, I don't expect you to try and tell me how to live my life. And I just think that's fantastic. That's a real clincher for me. For example, because I backed gay marriage back in publicly back in about March or April 2011 when I was leader of the opposition in Queensland. And I was really amazed, mate, because all hell broke loose and people piled on because apparently no one had ever said that from the Conservative side. And even Penny Wong in those days wouldn't even, back it. So, anyway, so the libertarian philosophy is what attracted me. So here I am. And like you, we're all trying to make a difference in this very important federal election.
I certainly think important federal election for goodness ever that I can recall.
Well, look, just again for your background for your viewers, I was first involved with the Liberal Party, not as a member, but my first involvement was at the age of 12, back in 1975. And, I've been associated with the Liberal Party ever since, up until last year. So it was a big break for me. But I think my mum and dad would would get it, because the Liberal Party have completely trashed their values. They don't believe in them anymore. They don't believe in small business. They don't support, small government, and have proved that in the last year. So I know you want to talk about some of those things, particularly on tax, but they've really sold out. And can I say as well, the guy you're up against, I mean, and that, God, mate, have they sold country people out as well? I mean, take this net zero thing. That's diabolical for regional Australia and people on the land. You could forget all the commitments. Once we're on the path, all the promises will be null and void ultimately, and inevitably Labor with the Greens sort of rump will get in, and they'll just turn the screws even more. So I'm really pleased you're going after McCormack, because he really hasn't achieved for his electorate. But again, he's part of the Nats who've sold country Australia out.
It's very disappointing. I mean, we are a national stronghold out here, and I've got a lot of friends that are Nats supporters, and they don't quite understand the difference. And one of the key differences that I keep pointing out is this low flat tax concept that we've been banging on about. Now, I've been banging on about it publicly for long before I even knew what a libertarian was. Mate, this portion of our Freedom Manifesto, low flat income tax, low flat company tax. How do they benefit? How are they going to improve the lives of particularly regional people? But what are your thoughts?
Well, I guess here's the full document. So I'd say this up front. If viewers want to go to ldp.org.au/freedom, they'll find this document. They can read it in detail, because there's a lot more than we're about to talk about. There's some really fantastic policy areas. So we're just talking about one of 10 policy areas. So the policy area that you've just asked about is the low flat taxes one. So there's two main parts to this. One, there's stuff we're talking about for you and me and our friends and families, individuals as taxpayers, and the other bit's the bit for companies. But I guess the background of this is really important, because our Australian tax system now is really complicated. And you have a series of tax brackets. So think about the various tax brackets. And what happens is the game that gets played is that as people's pay goes up, they go into a higher tax bracket. And over the years, as progressively, I know people would like bigger pay rises than they've seen the last 4 or 5 years. But anyway, inevitably with inflation, people get into higher tax brackets, and suddenly they're being hit with high marginal rates of tax. And then the politicians make this big thing, when they go, wow, we're giving you a tax cut. But really what's happened is people have been forced into higher and higher tax brackets, and the tax brackets should have been indexed with inflation to keep the amount of tax that people are paying being quite appropriate. So the bottom line of our system is that more and more people are paying higher rates of tax because they're going into these higher tax brackets. And that's called bracket creep. So what does that then? What does that then create as well? Well, it creates huge incentives, mate, for people to try and play, games with their deductions. They have to spend money with their accountant. They work overtime, putting a lot of time and effort into and brain power into how they actually try and keep out. For example, if you don't want to go over $180,000 a year because you're paying effectively 50 cents in the dollar. Half of everything you earn is going straight to the tax man. But even the tax bracket below that, which is in the hundreds, the early 100,000s, you're paying 40 cents plus the Medicare levy, etc. on that. So it's still pretty high. So what we're saying, cutting to the chase, this is all about simplification. We're saying let's have a low flat tax, 20%, and the tax-free threshold is $40,000. So you don't pay any tax till you've gone over 40 grand, and then it's 20%. So straight away, it's a simpler system. People aren't trying to game it and putting, all that energy into that. But something else that goes with this, mate, is that, the other side of the puzzle, which the government play games with people on, is they have you been taxed at high rates. But then what they do is they give you an allowance. They say, here's a family tax, here's a family allowance there, here's another allowance here. And so basically they making big fellas of themselves by handing back money that they took from the first place. So the Lib Dems' philosophy is, let's have low rates of tax. Let's do away with all the allowances. Let you and your family decide how you want to spend your money. Let's give it to you up front. And we believe individuals can make better decisions about their money than the good old government. Because I've been in government, mate, at state and local government level, and I can tell you it's a very inefficient mix master that churns through all that cash and hands it back to people.
Mate, no doubt about it. And as a very Australian, I look at it. I look at money in my pocket weekly. On a weekly, Australians do. I buy off the cut. It's devastating. Perpetuates poverty.
Dean, I'm not sure if you're having some problems. I know we're live, but there's a bit of audio problems that you're cutting out. I don't know if I'm cutting out with you. So I wasn't getting all your words then, mate.
Oh, was there a little bit of... that's unusual.
It's okay now. Yeah, it was just cutting out a bit before. Anyway, mate, if you want me to keep going, the other part about this that we should talk about is what happens with company tax.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that for sure. Let's do it.
Well, basically, what we're saying here is a similar thing. We're saying the company tax rate should be cut to 20 cents in the dollar as well, 20%. And the benefit of that is, firstly, it's obviously a big incentive for people to actually set up companies, run companies, employ people, create wealth for themselves and indeed for the employees, and to also invest in businesses. Because that's what we do in Australia right now. But, if we're to get out of the COVID mess and actually ultimately make this a prosperous country, we need lots of entrepreneurs. We need people who want to have a go. We need to actually incentivise them. And the idea of a low tax rate for companies is one of the biggest incentives we could give them. The other thing, though, is if you'll notice, it's the same 20% as for the personal income tax. The benefit of that as well is this issue about people gaming the system. So it means that there's not weird incentives about keeping money in companies and holding it back rather than paying yourself a higher pay. So, for example, today, with a company tax rate of, I think, of about 27 cents or 27.5 cents in the dollar, maybe dropping to 25 soon, what it means is that people will keep money in the company rather than pay themselves, because they don't want to go into that higher tax bracket I was talking about before, the $180,000. They definitely want to do that. So they keep their pay low. They pay low. And they're keeping the cash in the company rather than sort of bring it back to themselves. So there's really, what I'm trying to paint is a picture of there's all these weird distortions that occur that occupy time and energy, and it's not productive. It's about gaming the system. And so we're just saying, let's make it simple and straightforward. I guess there's one final thing I probably should talk about, because people might be going, well, hang on. Well, lower tax, how does that all work? How does the country pay its bills? Well, there's a concept that's explained in the policy, which is an economic theory that's been around for 40 years or so at least. It's called the Laffer curve. The bottom line is that it says that if you keep increasing taxes, eventually you have a situation where the taxation on individuals and companies reaches a certain point where the revenue that you'd expect does this. It actually flattens and it goes down. In an extreme case, if I said to you, great news, Dean, from now on, if you get taxed, you're going to be taxed, let's say 65 cents in the dollar for every dollar you earn, say over, 90 grand. How enthusiastic are you going to be about those extra days and hours, maybe a bit of overtime? I mean, that's bringing it home. So really our view, and a number of economists' views in this country, are that we really are taxing people at too high a level, and we're stifling economic activity, we're stifling the aspiration of individuals. If we just back off in the way that we're saying, that we'll actually get more revenue coming into government because there'll be more activity. So there's a graph of that. If people do go to the document, that I was probably not going to come up very well, but that's trying to illustrate what I was saying. So you don't want to be taxing beyond that point, because the overall revenue to government comes down. So look, this isn't sort of a thought bubble. This is real economic theory that we'd like to see deployed in this country, so that we all can be more prosperous.
Sorry. I'll mute you for that, mate. I'll tell you what. Look, I love the philosophy of it. Most people in Australia don't realise there's over 125 different taxes that are levied against Australians across the board annually. It's surprising. I was surprised. I sat there one night and trolled through the the Taxation Australia websites, trying to work it all out. And my head was blown, because I'm very average Joe. And when I read these things, I'm not an economist. I didn't spend years at uni. I'm a chef by trade. And I read these things, and all that happens to me is, why are we being robbed 125 times? If this was a legitimate thing, it could be very simple. It could be a very easy process. And for whatever reason, it's not. And the fact that it's not tells me that it's not as genuine as I'd certainly like it to be. If they outright said, I can go the far end and go, I'd really like no tax, leave everybody alone. I could go full anarchist on that one, some days depending on the day. But I understand we have to fund hospitals and things like that. I would never want to defund hospitals. But there's the reality, then there's the far fantasy, and then there's everything in between. But 125 taxes seems very disingenuous. It seems very sneaky and dishonest. And mate, you've been in politics. You've been called every name under the sun. I've been called a few. I think a lot of that would dissipate if it was more transparent, more upfront, more. GST, when Howard brought it in, was supposed to simplify things so much more. And we were supposed to cut tax. We still pay a luxury car tax in this country that was brought in to protect Toyota and Holden. Toyota and Holden no longer exist in this country, yet somehow we're still paying a luxury car tax if we want to drive one of those cars. Am I wrong? Am I missing something?
Oh, look, can I make a more general comment that goes on for what you said? I'll let people in on a little secret here, Dean, is that never back a tax increase by the politicians, even if they dress it up with the best of arguments, intentions, because government's insatiable. I'm a bit of a student of history, and you can go back hundreds and hundreds of years. You can go back to the English king, people like Henry VIII, who were always on the prowl for more money, because once they got it, they spent it. I'm afraid governments are like that. In my political career, I'm going to be right up front here. There's only one occasion I ever backed a new tax, and that was in relation to the National Disability Insurance Scheme. And what I said to Gillard, who was the Prime Minister at the time, I said, look, this is going to cost the country a lot of money, and it is. You really do need to have a mechanism to fund this, and you've got to make the argument. And I said, if you do that, I will back you. So it's a matter of the record. She wasn't prepared to do that. But that's the only time I've ever done that I can recall in my political career, because I've seen it time and time again. If you give the public servants more money, they will spend it. And I just say to people, having been in government, there is waste, there is inefficiency everywhere at every level of government, particularly in state and federal governments. Local government, I think, is the best run level of government. Some people watching this might not agree with me. I think councils around Australia do a pretty good job generally. And they don't have huge revenue raising powers. The federal government gets all the money, basically, most of the money. States get a fair bit of the money, and the councils get sweet, can I say this, FA. So they tend to be more efficient. Whereas, I can just tell you, one of the criticisms you alluded to before about me was that we actually made about 14,000 public servants redundant. Now, they weren't sacked, they made redundant. But you know what? by the time I'd finished as Premier, the hospitals had the best surgical waiting times in the nation. The ambulance ramping had been ended, and we had more police on the beat. We reduced crime by 15 to 20% across various some very important categories. So the point is, when it was a fire, the ambo still turned up. When the fire brigade turned up, when you needed an ambulance, the ambos turned up. We actually had a well-performing government, even though we cut expenditure. So that just shows you there's a lot of people doing jobs that aren't absolutely vital. And what I say to people watching this, that's your money. It's not the government's money, it's your bloody money. And they get to take it off you and your family, and it's money that you can use to better your life, to pay off your home quicker, to look after your kids in terms of trying to buy their first home, or helping them with their education, or buying them the musical instrument, or paying for dance lessons, or whatever. That's your money. But people seem to think it's the government's money. It ain't the government's money, it's bloody your money, Dean.
Mate, 100% I agree that it is our money. It's the people's money, and government, whatever they get. And look, I always say to people, you could always give more if there's no rule that says you can't donate more tax. I think that we should start from the least amount humanly possible. And then if you think that you should donate more, go for it. If you think that whichever politician at times doing a great job and you want to support I love seeing people put their own money into community projects if they're willing to do so. I think that's great. But unfortunately, most people are violently stolen from the day their working life starts. That was one of the first things that kicked me off when I was my first job. I'd calculated how much money I was making and how much, I saw this money and what's this tax stuff, Mum? And I lost it, and I've been cranky about it ever since, to be honest. And, I do give a lot of charities and all that sort of fun stuff. It's not like I want to keep it all, but I want to be able to control where it goes and have that sort of control over my earnings and where it goes. Now, obviously, we do this on every Monday night. We try and keep it pretty short and sharp and just touch on the policy topics. Maybe Campbell would be happy enough and we can do a proper live stream where we'll do an interview one day. There's a few people trying to sort of go, when can we ask questions? We don't really do that as far as this particular thing goes. I'm sure Campbell's pretty available. He's pretty easy to find. Hit him up on Twitter or, wherever you want to talk to him. I found him to be very...
Well, I'm happy to answer questions as well if you want to do it again sometime, Dean. If that's of help to you and your campaign and the team and your team, very happy to. And when you do this, when you go about being involved in politics, not that we're elected, it's just as if you are elected, you've got to be prepared to answer any question. So always happy to do that, mate. So we should do it. We should do that in the future.
Mate, appreciate it. Effort made to participate. Now, in our little wind-up, now we've got the Riverina Rebellion happening Wednesday nights. This Wednesday night at the Riverina Club Wagga, there's going to be some really cool speakers. Ross Cameron's going to be there. John Ruddick's going to be there. John Lartar's going to be there. He's one of the ambos who lost his job through the mandates. Stand-up guy. We've got, who else have we got? I think Craig Kelly's still talking about coming down. There's going to be some interesting characters. And what I've done that's a little bit different to what most candidates and political parties do is I've actually invited all the candidates. Well, not all the candidates. I didn't invite Mr. McCormack. But I've reached out to some of the other current candidates that have announced that are going to be running in the Riverina. And I've invited them to have a speak and do a bit of an introductory thing with my audience because, if you're not going to vote for me, if you think Dean's an arsehole or whatever you think, which is fine, you might like the UAP guy. You might like One Nation don't currently have a candidate, but if they do, I'll be more than happy to work with them. There's a couple of great independents that are there, some slightly left-leaning, some slightly right-leaning. I don't really care. I'm just happy to work with people who are trying to be honest and fair income about where they stand. So that's a $25 event. There's still tickets available at the door. It's just going to be friendly, fun, little bit of chat, few drinks, all that sort of stuff. So anybody who'd like tickets, they're on Eventbrite, and with all my socials, you can log on to all of those. Obviously, as far as that, we're getting can we have a Look, Campbell, can we organise a night one day through the week, maybe, if you're interested, where we can do a proper Q&A session and people can hammer you on all these questions that they want to ask you?
Absolutely. Let's just offline, mate. Let's make a time.
So, a bit concerned, that you can't do this. It's not that we don't. It's just this particular program is 20 odd minutes talking about one specific policy. So, Campbell, I thank you so much for your time. I've only booked the man for 25, 30 minutes for this. So don't be mad at Campbell on this one. Be mad at me. That's the setup for the program.
Well, can I just say this to support Dean for those who are watching? Please get behind him. Love you to turn up to the event. I obviously not going to be there, but there's a great lineup of people. And I'll just say this to people, Dean, this is really important. We're going to keep saying this. If you keep voting the same way, you're going to get the same result. If we keep voting for a parliament full of political hacks, and I don't mind, I'm happy to be someone that you can fire a shot at me. Well, I've been a businessman for more time in my life and an army officer for far more time than I was ever in politics. So I'm pointing the finger at people who've never done anything in their lives other than be politicians, ministerial staffers, union officials, peak body lobbyists, you name it, but they haven't had real jobs and they certainly haven't been hurt in COVID. So if we keep voting the same way, we'll get the same people. And that's why I say to people, I hope you get behind Dean. If you don't want to vote for people like Dean or myself in Queensland, if you're watching from up in Queensland, well, that's fine. But find a really good minor party or independent candidate to get behind. Don't waste your vote. It's too important in 2022.
Mate, and on that note, thank you very much. Thank you for everybody who's tuned into the Riverina Rebellion this week. We'll do it next week. And as soon as I book Campbell for a little bit of a private Q&A session sometime in the next week or two, I will advertise it and you'll all be more than welcome to tune in and we'll make that a specific thing. That's just not what we've been doing every Monday night, so we won't change the game at short notice. So, Campbell, thank you for your time. Have a great night, mate. Have a great night, everybody.
Everybody. Yep.